Hi, I'm Rome Kazada, senior editor of the Science Fiction Book Club, and I'm here with Justin Cronin, the author of The Passage, one of this summer's most anticipated books. The Passage marks a bit of a transition for you. So what was it like working in the realms of science fiction books and suspense and horror books?
It was a bit of a change, but not maybe as much of a change as people think. My intention writing the book was to sort of stage my own reunion with the kinds of books that made me want to be a writer in the first place. Mm-hmm. I grew up on a steady diet of fiction of every kind. A lot of it was speculative science fiction. These are the books of the era. I read a lot of Bradbury, Heinlein, Asimov, Clarke, and I loved these books. They were what made me want to be a writer in the first place. I'm also a child of the Cold War, so I read an awful lot of post-apocalyptic fiction, which is, of course, still around, but in some ways there was something of a golden era for that. If you're going to write a book about the end of the world, you also have to answer the question, well, what will save us? What's savable about us?
There are a lot of vampire series and vampire stories out there, and a lot of variations on the vampire. And your creation of a species is quite original. What's your take on the vampire mystique, and how did you come up with your version?
Well, the vampires in The Passage, and the word is used only occasionally in The Passage. Actually, they have far more names than that, and as I said, the name vampires is probably the least of them. Mm-hmm. These are not your teenage daughter's vampires. I mean, very clearly, the vampire tradition is essentially a Gothic tradition in which vampires are magical beings. They're magical beings. Science is the magic of my lifetime, so I tried to ground the beings of The Passage in something like a plausible scientific reality. Essentially, they're the creation of medical science gone bad. The thing about the vampire story, apart from the fact that it's nearly ubiquitous, mm-hmm. Like every culture in the world's got something like it, is that it's enormously flexible. It's a great and compelling narrative. It always goes to one question, which is basically, what part of your humanity would you trade away in order to live forever, right? In other words, if your existence was not finite, would you still be a person? To what extent does death make us alive? A fundamental question, everybody asks it in their lifetime, and it captures it so elegantly, the story just stays around forever. Right?
That's a terrific way of explaining it, because a large part of science fiction is pushing the boundaries of humanity and how far can we go and still remain human. Right.
Yes, it's really one of the fundamental threads of speculative fiction, and the vampire narrative is just a very it's part and parcel of those fundamental questions.
How far into the book had you gotten when you realized you were going to destroy the world, and how much fun did you have destroying the world? Okay,
well, the answer to the second question is far too much fun. Well, it's a grave act, but nevertheless, you're writing a book, and I think that writing about the end of human civilization has been writing and telling stories about it and imagining it we've been doing it since we dropped from the trees. So, I was drawn to it from the start. I knew I was going to do it. It was part of the original what if supposition of the novel, and when I came to write it, it felt as if I've been waiting to write it for 47 years. Yeah. And I think that's because I'd read all those books when I was a young man. I mean, the book that made the largest impression on me when I was a kid was Earth Abides by George Stewart, which is one of the great all-time end-of-the-world novels.
Amazing. I have not heard anyone mention that book.
I still have my original mass-market paperback at 50 cents. Was on that I bought years ago. It's got my 5th grade or 6th grade's name written in it, and it's a treasure, that book.
Fantastic.
One of the pleasures of speculative fiction is always that question, that gesture towards saying, well, if I'm going to play out the world, I'm going to add 10 years to the world, I'm going to add 20 years to the world, I'm going to add 200, 1,000, whatever it is you're going to add, trying to imagine that future in some ways, in a way that's plausible. That's, I think, one of the pleasures of reading speculative fiction, and it certainly is of writing it. It's a very dangerous thing to do, though, actually, because it often dates very badly. You're often proven wrong, And I grew up in an era where we were pretty certain that by the year, say, 2001, we'd all be living on the moon and soaring to work in helicopters. And of course, none of that has happened. The future has played out very, very differently, not just in terms of its in terms of technology and its material assets, but in terms of how history looks now.
Have you ever been to Comic-Con, and are you planning to go this year?
Yeah, they're sending me to Comic-Con. This is my maiden voyage to Comic-Con, which has become sort of the great bazaar of speculative fiction and ideas and movies and films and TV. So it's actually the last thing I'm doing on tour. So it's kind of, you know, the crescendo.
It's the Big Bang,
yeah,
exactly.
And I've heard about this. I've heard about Comic-Con. I know that the fans go crazy, and it's huge, and it's a huge Hollywood influence. I'm dying to go. I'm glad they're sending me. It's sort of like the present I get at the end of a long book tour.
The film rights for The Passage have been optioned by Ridley Scott of Blade Runner fame, one of the best science fiction films ever.
No doubt.
To this day. Could you tell us a little bit about any movement that's gone on?
Yeah, the screenplay's been written. Actually, I know the first version of it, because these things, of course, they tend to grow over time. But I've been out there. I've talked to the players involved. They're all super smart and interesting, and they get the book. What I'm seeing is that things are moving ahead, and I haven't seen the screenplay yet. I'm really looking forward to it.
Any casting ideas you have in mind?
People ask me that all the time, and I am so relieved I do not have to pick that. I know that because a lot of the characters are fairly young, they would be using younger actors, right? And so I'm less familiar with who they might use. I secretly kind of think that Russell Crowe would make a great Wolgast. And of course, Ridley Scott has used him in several films, and the screenwriter for the novel is the guy who wrote Gladiator, a guy named John Logan. So that's kind of a nice little power triangle. And but again, I'm the novelist. That's my job.
My name is Amy, and I'm 97 years old. I remember the time before, when the cities were full of people and animals. I used to ride the bus with my mother, and then she went away. That was before it ended. Before I knew that I would be the one, and that the end was really only the beginning.